Fun.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to one of our Earth Month webinars. We're going to talk about Charged Up, everything you need to know about EV charging. So hopefully we'll answer all of your charging questions. If not, we really suggest that you put any questions you may have in the Q&A. Either myself or Ezra will try to get through them during the presentation, or we'll have some time at the end to discuss them out loud. So just so everybody knows, this presentation is being recorded, so we will be sending this along after the fact with like a list of also like any handy links that we think you might appreciate. And we'll send this via email probably later today or maybe tomorrow, depending upon like how fast this video uploads. So without further ado, we think we can go to the next slide. So if you haven't heard of us before, Green Energy Consumers Alliance is a nonprofit based in both Massachusetts and Rhode Island with a mission to empower consumers and communities to speed a just transition to a zero carbon world. So what exactly does that mean? It means that we do a lot of policy and advocacy work around sustainable energy, and also we have programmatic work like our Drive Green program, which is kind of how we're here to talk to you today. So in the Drive Green program, we do a lot of education about electric vehicles, their benefits, and pretty much let you know anything you'd possibly want to know about electric vehicles. So if you haven't already, please feel free to check out our website after this webinar, greenenergyconsumers.org/drivegreen. And who's speaking to you? So my name is Devin DeLibero, and I am the Electric Vehicle Program Coordinator. Again, I work on the Drive Green team, and I've been with the program for almost 7 years now. And then with me today is my colleague who will introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Ezra Messenger. I'm the Electric Vehicle Program Associate, and I'm going on 1 year here.
And so for today's webinar, Ezra will actually be doing a lot of the talking, and then I will chime in here and there, and I've got some parts in the middle, so just be prepared for that. But generally in this webinar, we will talk about how charging works. We'll talk about the different levels of charging. So level 1 and level 2 charging we'll focus on first. Then we'll talk about installing a charging unit at your home, whether that be as a single family home or someone who lives in a multi-family home. We'll talk about public charging networks and DC fast charging, which is the fastest level of charging, also called level 3.
All right.
Okay, now I'm going to go off camera for a little bit for Ezra.
Okay, so we're going to start with how charging works. And I do want to stress this presentation gets very in-depth. You don't have to understand everything. We just really wanted to cover everything there was to know about charging. It is also my first time covering this specific webinar, so please bear with us as we do a deep dive into charging. So we'll start first with the basics of electricity. So electricity is not always the most intuitive thing to talk about, but knowing a few key terms can really help understand what's going on with charging. So let's all get on the same page in terms of vocabulary, but just know this is not a class in electrical engineering. But if you're going to see some of these terms thrown around, we think it's good to have a general sense of what they mean. It also helps to put all of this in terms of something that you can easily visualize, like water flowing through a pipe. And we have a graph, like a graphic on the right that kind of covers that, but we'll go through each of these terms first. So voltage is the electric potential. It's determined by the power source. So a household outlet typically delivers 120 volts AC, but you can install higher voltage outlets too, which usually support bigger appliances like a dryer or refrigerator that need a lot of power. High voltage means higher capacity for electric flow. Next is current, and this is the easiest to understand. It's the speed of flowing electrons. It's analogous to the speed of water flowing through a pipe. So how much current flows out depends on how much power is required for whatever you're using. Devices can automatically draw whatever current they need, and circuit breakers make sure that the current is managed to a safe level so that the current does not surge up and overload the electrical wires. Next is power, and this is the one that we really care about in this presentation. So power is the energy delivered in a given amount of time. So higher power means faster charging generally, but it does depend on both voltage and current. Increasing the voltage or current will increase the power. And then last is energy, and this describes how much storage capacity is actually within the battery. Energy is what translates to miles you can drive, and it's the capacity to do work that's measured in kilowatt hours. Now, like we said, you can think of electricity like water flowing through a pipe. And on this graph here, you can see a high capacity cord is similar to a large pipe through which the electricity flows. And then you have higher speeds through a bigger pipe means faster charging. So this equation, using this pipe analogy, would be water speed representing current times the pipe size, which represents the potential or the volts. And this will equal the flow or the power in watts. Next, we're going to talk about driving range and charging speed, because these are the two biggest questions that people always have. How far can I go and how fast can I charge? So first, how far can I go? Size of the battery determines how much energy you can store in the car. The more energy you have, the more driving range you'll have. Efficiency describes how good the car is at converting energy into miles driven. Bigger cars are usually less efficient, but efficiency can vary depending on both the road conditions and your own driving style, such as how fast you drive or brake. Unlike gas-powered cars, EVs are actually more efficient at city speeds and stop and go traffic and not high speeds and highways. And then lastly, weather. It's surprising how big of an impact the ambient temperature makes. Batteries have an ideal operating temperature. So in the winter, you need to use energy from the battery to keep it at that correct temperature, but that will then cut into the range. But in the summer, when the weather is nicer and warmer, you'll get way more miles out of the car than what's stated by that EPA estimated range for any particular vehicle because the car doesn't have to warm up the battery. Now, second question that we usually get, how fast can I charge? So this is determined first by the power source. Charging is basically the process of transferring energy from an outlet to the battery for storage. So the power source is a major factor, and this limits how fast you can charge. You can't draw more power than what's available from the source. The other limiting factor is the onboard charger, and that's located within the car itself. Now, terminology might be a little confusing here because generally when people say charger, they typically mean the cable, but an onboard charger is not the cable and it's not the charging station, which if you see that graph on the right, it's pictured in green. The onboard charger is actually located within the car itself. Now, before energy can be stored in the battery, the power has to be converted from AC power, and that's the power that the outlet supplies, to DC power, and that's the power that the device or the car actually uses. That's what the onboard charger does. So even if you're plugged into a charging station that delivers a ton of power, the car can only process all of that power so quickly. Now, I'll clarify exactly how that affects charging in a little bit. So if you have questions about this particular topic, I ask that you wait just for now. Lastly, weather can affect how fast you charge. It affects charging speeds in the same way that it affects driving range. So in the winter, when it is colder, it will charge slower. Next, we're going to talk about the different levels of charging. So we're going to start with the lowest level, level 1 charging, and this uses just a regular household outlet. Now, all EVs will come with a cable that can plug directly into this regular outlet. It's the same as charging a smartphone. The port for this type of charging is pictured on the left, and most EVs will have a J1772 port for both level 1 and level 2 charging, except for for Tesla, which is also known as the North American Charging Standard, or NACS. And soon manufacturers will be using NACS, but we'll talk about that later in the presentation. For now, you just need to know that the NACS port can be used for all three levels of charging. Now, a household outlet does not deliver a lot of power, and the batteries in EVs are very large. You can typically only get about 4 miles of range per hour of charging. That can vary between 2 and 6 miles, depending on how cold it is, but 4 is a good year-round average. So 4 miles of range in an hour sounds pretty low. But those 4 miles of range over 10 hours of overnight charging would provide about 40 miles a day, which is actually the average driving distance for most Americans. So a lot of people will underestimate how useful level one charging is, but for most commutes, it's plenty and it will cover your daily driving. But remember, you're not just sitting there with the car for those full 10 hours while it's charging. All you have to do is park the car, plug it in, takes about 10 seconds, and you can go about your day. But what about people who drive more than 40 miles a day? Well, level two charging is a really great way because it makes charging much faster and it makes driving an EV more convenient and more practical for those who have longer distances. Level two charging uses the same port as level one, so either the J1772 or the Tesla or NACS port. And let's say you drive about 250 miles in a day. You can recharge the whole car overnight by plugging it into a level two charging station, which you can have installed in your own house. Now, if you look there, there's a picture of it up close. It says Juice Box. That's just a particular brand of this charger. And these types of chargers are known as EVSE or electric vehicle supply equipment. It's both the cable and the box that connects your car to a 240-volt outlet, and it manages the electric current running between both of them. It's used to prevent the current from flowing if the charging port and cable aren't properly connected. So it essentially functions as safety equipment to protect both your car and the electrical system. One side of the cable has that J1772 port, and then the other side plugs into the outlet. And if you look closely, it's the black cord right there. That's a four-prong 240-volt outlet, and it's different from what you would use in your house for like charging a smartphone, but it's similar to an outlet for a major appliance if you have, let's say, an electric dryer. Now, level two charging is faster than level one because the charging station is plugged into a 240-volt outlet, and that delivers more voltage, and the charging station can manage a higher current safely. So both the current and the voltage allow more power to be delivered to the car via charging, thus decreasing the charging time. Now we spoke about NACS a little bit. Here's the port again, the North American Charging Standard, also known as Tesla charging. And like we said, it's used for all three levels of charging. What's great about NACS or the Tesla charger is the infrastructure that Tesla has built out. So there are actually over 20,000 Tesla supercharger ports across North America, and you can see pictured there some of their locations. Now, NACS has recently partnered with several major automakers, including Ford, Rivian, General Motors, which encompasses Chevrolet, GMC, and Cadillac, Acura, Honda, and all other major automakers. The last to join was the Stellantis Group, which includes Jeep and Dodge. And starting in spring 2024, adapters are going to be rolled out for all of these partnered manufacturers. The rollout started with GM and Ford, but will eventually include all automakers. Um, these adapters are being offered both for free from some of the automakers or at cost. So if you're looking to buy in 2024, you should see, but you might potentially have to pay for an adapter. Starting in 2025, all the partnered vehicles from these automakers will come equipped with the NACS port standard. So the J1772 port and the CCS combo for fast charging will eventually be phased out. Now, how fast can the EV actually charge at level two? So we have a graph here that explains how fast, how many miles of range, and the different cars that will receive that range. So the onboard charging capacity, starting at the top with over 10 kilowatt capacity, will provide about 30 plus miles of range per hour of charging. There's a little bit of discrepancy because, like we said, the weather can play a role. Cars with this level of charger capacity include the Chevy Bolt and the Hyundai Kona EV. Next, in the 7.7 to 10 kilowatt range, which will get about 25 to 30 miles of range per hour of charging, include most Tesla models. And then I'm going to jump to the bottom in that 3.3 to 3.7 kilowatt range. These are different plug-in hybrids, and they will charge at a slower speed at roughly 11 miles per hour of miles per hour of charging, excuse me. And cars with this level of capacity include the Toyota Prius Prime, the Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid, the Kia Niro plug-in hybrid, and the Chevy Volt, which is no longer available, but was also a plug-in hybrid. Now, here's a quick recap. So even if the car can charge quickly, it can't draw more power than what the station can actually supply. So let's say your car has a 7.2 kilowatt onboard charger, but you plug into a 6.6 kilowatt station. Well, it's only going to be able to charge at that 6.6 kilowatts. But let's say you take that same car with 7.2 kilowatt onboard charger and you plug it into a 10 kilowatt station. Well, it's only going to charge at 7.2 kilowatts. So in theory, automakers could improve this figure, but that would add both weight and complexity to the car, which would then cut into the efficiency, therefore limiting the range. So they're trying to create a balance of a car that can both charge fast, but can also go far on a single charge. Now we're going to stop here and see if there's any questions that we should address.
That is a very good question. It's, do you know, with so many J1772 charger ports already available, will 2025 vehicles that are switching to NACS also come with a J1772 adapter? So I don't know that. I don't think there have been any announcements as of yet regarding that fact, but I know that that technology is already out there because Tesla cars come with those adapters standard, I believe. And I'm sure you could buy them if you needed to. Whether or not the automaker will give it to you for free is another thing.
There was a comment. This person wanted to let the audience know that not all EVs come with a standard level one charger. For example, the Kia EV6 doesn't. That's good to know. So when you are searching for a car, just be sure that you speak with the dealership and you know whether the charging cable is included for free or not. And that's just good information.
And then the next question is, what is the Tesla Y uh, onboard charger speed? I encourage you to Google that. I don't know all the different charger speeds off the top of my head. You can also go to our website, greenenergyconsumers.org/drivegreen, and go to the EV shopping tool because that will let you know at the very least how fast they can charge.
Yeah, and this chart here only covers level two, but most Teslas charge between 7.7 and 10 kilowatts. But like Devin said, definitely recommend checking out their website.
Okay, now I'm going to take over for just a little bit. So this next session is going to be about charging at home and on the go. Um, so there's obviously two main differences between electric cars and gas-powered cars. And that's refueling. So when you refuel your gas-powered car, you go to the gas station about once a week or so, and it takes 5 minutes, and it's a very like easy concept. It's something that's kind of ingrained in any like, car driver to be in that habit. Well, when you get an electric when you buy an electric car, you kind of have to shift that mindset to get into a little bit of a different habit when it comes to refueling your vehicle. So, um, most electric vehicles don't yet have the same median charge range that gas-powered vehicles do, because gas-powered vehicles have about 400 miles of range for a gas tank, whereas EVs are now starting to trend towards about 300 miles. But that's not really so much of an issue because you can charge at home or at grocery stores or wherever you do your errands very simply, and just like not think about it. You just plug it in and it's no big deal. You can do that whether you install a level two charging station at your home or whether you do it with just a regular port at level one. Um, it's just a different mindset. You can also just top up and like continually just add charge throughout the week instead of having to go to a charging station or, a gas station as in the case of a gas powered car. So it's just a little bit different way of thinking, but still very convenient. Next slide, please. So kind of like I said a little bit before, charging at home is very easy. There are two different levels available for you if you want to charge at home. You have to decide whether level charging at a level one uh, at the level one rate is works for you and your uses of your vehicle, or if you need to get a level two charging unit installed at your home. And again, all you do is simply like plug it in as soon as you get home, and you don't have to think about it again until you leave. And you can also like schedule how long you want it to charge through your some cars have it through their car, and then sometimes you can do it through the station if it's a smart station. So we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Now, if you want to install a level two charging unit at your home, um, that's a great option. So we have this guide that helps you figure out your charging needs when you're charging at home. So the guide, in addition to figure out your charging needs, it also helps you to pick out a charging station unit. But we're not going to name names of any different charging station units because we are not trying to sway you in one direction or the other. We just kind of give you the basic facts to look out for. Like one thing that we tell people to look out for, I definitely tell people to look out for, is NEMA rating, which basically lets you know um, how weatherproof the charging unit is. So if you're not putting it in your garage, that might be important to you. We also let you know what you need an electrician for. And I usually tell people to go on what was previously Angie's List. It's now just Angie to find a local electrician if they don't know one already. And it's literally one of the services you can choose from when you're first on that website. So it's fairly run of the mill thing for an electrician to do. Typically installing a level two charging unit at your home, that will run you about $1,200. That includes the cost of the charging station unit and also the electrician's work. But that again is dependent upon your personal situation. If you have any other electrical issues, it might cost you a little bit more. And now you might be thinking, well, thanks for all that information, but I live at an apartment or a condo, so like that doesn't do me much of a service. Well, we have another guide, which is called Empower Your Tenants with EV Charging FAQs. So this is something you as a tenant could give to your apartment manager or condo association and say, here is why this would be such a great amenity and help attract new people to the apartment or condos. Um, and that's like a first step to get them interested and just to show them like why it's such an important thing, and also for the future of the apartment complex or condo association, because the future is electric, and if you don't have anywhere to charge your car, most likely it's not going to be as exciting to try to secure a place to live at that apartment building or condo complex. Another question we get asked about a lot, particularly when you're charging at home, is fuel costs. So we've done a little bit of math for you. So we took the three major electricity suppliers in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. So National Grid and Eversource in Massachusetts, and then Rhode Island Energy in Rhode Island. And we figured out how much it costs uh, to drive on a mile of electricity. If you're interested in what all of that math looks like in the equations themselves, I definitely encourage you after the fact to click on this fuel cost page. Ezra will send around the recording, but also the slide deck, so you can click on any of the links that we have listed here. So if you are, go back, please. If you are a National Grid customer in Massachusetts, you will typically pay 10 cents per mile to run your car on electricity. For an Eversource customer, you'll pay just over 8 cents per mile. And for a Rhode Island Energy customer, you'll pay 7 cents per mile, which could save you quite a bit of money, actually, because we've done also a little bit more math to figure out how much it would cost you to run a car on a mile of gasoline, and it's about 12 cents. So typically you will see in National Grid Service territory, you would save just over 2 cents. In Eversource, you would save 4 cents per mile. And in Rhode Island, you would save just over 5 cents per mile. So do know that these rates for especially for the utility companies will change about every 6 months, so these numbers will fluctuate a little bit. They tend to be lower in the summer months and the warmer months, and a little bit higher in the winter months, but generally speaking, it is still less to drive your car a mile on electricity than it is on gasoline. Okay. So next, we just kind of wanted to go over your bill. So this is a sample bill for somebody, one of our coworkers who lives in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And the first thing we wanted to point out is that there's a $10 fixed customer charge from Eversource because this person lives in Eversource territory. The next thing is that because this person lives in a um, aggregation community where they're not serviced like their electricity doesn't come from Eversource. It actually comes from somewhere else. You'll see that supplier is not Eversource. So just kind of like getting you familiar with your energy bill, if your electricity bill, if you're not already. But Eversource does still provide all the infrastructure to get those electrons to your house. So just know that. Next, your bill, you'll see a generation charge because she is in a aggregation community. I believe her generation charge is a little bit more because she opted up. So yours might be a little bit different. And then finally, there's these delivery charges, which encompass a lot of different things. But in order to figure out how much it costs you um, to charge your car, you want to add those two numbers, the generation charge and the delivery charge, and you'll get how much it costs you per kilowatt hour. Ezra, can you click one more time? So yeah, so for this person, it's almost 29 cents per kilowatt hour, which does not mean it's 29 cents per mile. But that is part of the equation. So just know that is how you get some of those numbers. So to give an example of how much it would cost you to drive 100 miles um, on each of different utility rates, we took the Chevy Bolt, which has a battery size of 65 kilowatt hours, and it has an electric range of 259 miles. So for National Grid, we know that it costs 34 cents per kilowatt hour. For Eversource, it's 29 cents per kilowatt hour. And for Rhode Island Energy, it's 23 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, once we do some math, which again, you can see what the details that it entails on the fuel cost link, we found that to drive 100 miles as a National Grid customer with a Chevy Bolt, it'll cost you $10.20 at the current utility prices. It'll cost $8.70 if you live in Eversource territory and get serviced by Eversource. And in Rhode Island, it'll cost you $6.90. Now, if you want to compare that with the gas car, we took two examples, one with a gas car with a 30 miles per gallon, and that would cost, sorry, the gas car example is 30 miles per gallon car or 30 mpg car. We also took the average cost of per gallon of gas in Massachusetts. That was as of April 1st, which was $3.18. So altogether, that would cost somebody $10.60 to drive 100 miles, which is a little bit more than all of the electricity prices. Now, if you take that miles per gallon even lower, at 25.4 mpg, it would actually cost you $12.50 to drive 100 miles. So you'll see that it actually will save you a lot of money in the long run to drive on electricity than to drive on gas. And another thing is that gas prices fluctuate quite a bit. So we took that price, $3.18 per gallon, 16 days ago, and I believe, at least in Rhode Island where I live, it's closer to like 3.30 for gas. So you have a little bit more stability if you're refueling an electric car. So we talked a lot about charging at home. Now we're going to talk about public charging. So public level 2 charging is probably what you're going to see the most when you're out and about. So when you're charging on the go, you want to think about your regular driving routes and destinations and really map out like the best charging stations for you to utilize. So one of those charging stations that we really promote is PlugShare. PlugShare is crowdsourced, so it's not beholden to any one particular network of charging stations. It encompasses all the different networks of charging stations. So we really encourage people to check that out and to see what's around them, as they do their daily commutes and things like that. Another thing to mention is sometimes EV charging stations are really, really obvious when you're driving around. Sometimes they're not so obvious. Sometimes they're a little hidden away. So just another reason why it's really important to use different apps to figure out where the charging stations are, and do a little bit of research before you buy your first car. So like I said before, PlugShare is not beholden to any specific network, but there are a lot of different networks of charging stations. So here are the logos of some of the more popular ones around here. So ChargePoint, Electrify America, EVgo, things like that. Charging networks are really important to know about because some require you to get like individual apps to download and like in order to pay and things like that. So you want to just be sure that you are aware of them. Um, but charging networks use smart stations. It's like smart technology that help you monitor charging, estimate costs, and get a notification when charging is done using your phone. Um, so it really helps you in your charging everyday charging needs versus non-network charging stations, which you generally won't find that much in public. There's like they don't link up to your smartphone, and they can't tell you things like, when your car is done charging, that sort of thing. So just know that there are a lot of different charging networks out there, but PlugShare is probably the best way to find generally what's available in your area. And now we just wanted to do an example of charging it on the go and what that would possibly look like. So we started this. This was like a Rhode Island route example. So we started this by looking at Roger Williams Park and Zoo on PlugShare, and we found a AJ1772 charge point station on PlugShare, which is really exciting. You can see that it tells you it's open 24/7. There's parks and restrooms around, and that there are 4 charge point charging spots just to the left of the main entrance. So it tells you all the things that you really need to know. And then when you see the charge point one, you'll also see like the rates it charges you and things like that. Charge point will also, if you use it to find the station, it can tell you how far it is from you, that sort of thing. But generally, all these charging apps will tell you what kind of port is available, how many stations are at that location, is someone else already plugged in, how much will it cost to charge? Sometimes it's free, like this one. And do I have to pay to park too? Because that might be separate than just paying for the charging. And then how much power will the station deliver? So how much power the station delivers is actually really important too, because that will help you figure out how fast your car will charge. So if you like a 6.6 kilowatt charger is not that fast. So if your car can accept more, you might want to find a station if it's nearby that charges a little bit of a faster speed. So by the time you're done touring the zoo, your car is charged a little bit more. And now I'm going to give it back to Ezra.
All right, so there were a few questions during that section that I wanted to highlight. The first question, older homes might not be wired for the addition of EV charger. What questions should older homeowners ask of their electrician? First, I would definitely recommend downloading the guide. When I send out the slide deck, we will also include a link to that guide so you can check it out. But some things you should talk to the electrician about. Can your home handle this new load? That's really important because you might need to get a dedicated circuit installed, or perhaps you might not be able to handle the 240 volt for level two charging, you might have to stick to level one. So definitely get an electrician out who knows more than I do. But it could be complicated to install depending on how old the home is, or it could be pretty easy, especially if you have like a new wires put in already, a new circuit breaker.
I would
Um,
just like to jump in and say you could also like upgrade your box
right.
um to be more than, let's say, if it's like 100, maybe like a 200 amp service. But generally speaking, the level 2 charging unit, like it needs like a stove outlet kind of thing. Like that's how powerful it needs to be. So hopefully it won't be too bad even if your house is older.
Another person wanted to let people know that when you use PlugShare, you can check in and leave comments because it is crowdsourced information. That's a good point. Like Devin said, you can read reviews from other people, and if you're the one using the charger, it's definitely great to put reviews, especially if it was a good charger, so people know it's functioning, or if there was an issue with it. And someone else just shared. Local EV groups can put a QR code on level two chargers to seamlessly connect to PlugShare. That's a good point. I didn't even know that, but that's good to know because sometimes chargers are not listed on PlugShare. So because it is crowdsourced, it's great that if you do know of a charger that's available, that you add it to the list. So, thank you. And I believe that was it for questions for now. So we can move on. All right, so now we're going to cover the last section, which is fast charging. Now, for the most part, which we've already covered, level one and level two charging, those are good for daily driving. Many people do have concerns, though, about that occasional long distance very long drive, and they want to buy a car that can support them on those occasional journeys. So, for example, let's say you live in Boston and you're going to drive down to Philadelphia or DC, even, which is over 400 miles away. And let's say your car only has 250 miles of all electric, which is about average for most EVs on the market now. So, you're going to need charging along the way that can accommodate quick charging. So, you're not there for, let's say, 5 hours, 10 hours. So DC fast charging is the answer. It allows EVs to charge much faster despite the limitations of the car's onboard computer, or excuse me, onboard charger. So as a reminder, that onboard charger is required to convert power from AC to DC. But if the power from the station you have is already DC, then you can bypass that onboard charger and the energy can flow directly into the battery instead. So this means that it's possible to deliver a lot more power to the battery and therefore charge much faster. So unlike level one and level two, there are specialized ports just for this DC fast charging. The three ports are pictured on the right there. Starting with the top, we have the J1772 combo, the CHAdeMO in the middle, and then the Tesla or NACS port on the bottom. Note that the J1772 combo is the same as the J1772, but it has a little extra piece with those two ports at the bottom. CHAdeMO is an entirely different port in the car. This right now is mostly used by Nissan in the Leaf and then Mitsubishi for the Outlander plug-in hybrid. But it was recently announced that the standard will no longer be used in North America, so it's being phased out. And then, of course, Tesla, which we already said, uses all three, uses one port for all three levels of charging, including supercharging as well. So if you're overwhelmed or confused, that's okay. This has been a lot of information, but all you really need to know is what kind of port your particular car has. And then using those apps that Devin just showed you, you can find which charger station is compatible with your particular car. It's also important to note that previously, not all EVs came with this DC fast charging standard. So if you're looking to buy a used EV, just be sure that it has this feature if it's important to you. Currently, all new battery electric vehicles do offer DC fast charging standard, but plug-in hybrids do not offer DC fast charging standard at all, except for in the Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid. So if you're looking for a plug-in hybrid and you want fast charging, that is your one option. Now, how fast is this fast charging? It really depends on the car, just like with level two charging. Each vehicle has a different cap for DC fast charging. So if you are someone who does a lot of driving and you drive really far, it would be important to look into the spec. So for example, the Chevy Bolt has about a 50 kilowatt cap on fast charging. So for that figure, you'll often see advertised about 90 miles of range in 30 minutes of charging with like when all conditions are perfect. While the Nissan Leaf Plus has max charging rate of 100 kilowatts. So you can get about 120 miles in 30 minutes of charging. And then, of course, you can only charge as fast as the station that you're at can output power. So within DC fast charging stations, there are different levels of power that they can supply. So level two charging stations charge at a fairly consistent rate, but because DC fast charging is really high voltage, it introduces a lot of heat into the battery. And so the car manages its actual charging speed according to the temperature of the battery and how full the battery is to maximize both charging speed and battery health. Because DC fast charging is so high voltage and it introduces a lot of heat into the battery, it might not always be the best thing to do on a daily basis. So for most driving, it's easier and best to just stick with level one or level two driving for the majority of your charging. Um, and it's not usually necessary to do a DC fast charging for just like typical daily driving. It's also more expensive. And for that same reason, DC fast charging is only really fast up until 80%. Beyond that, it will slow down, and that's to avoid any further battery damage. Now here's a chart that we have with just some models that we picked that are really popular. And we'll start with Nissan Leaf at the top. That has a small driving, like a very low driving range at only 150 miles, but it can charge very quickly. So it will, with a 50 kilowatt max power charging, it can achieve about 120 miles in 40 minutes, which is almost the full range. For the Nissan Leaf Plus, it has a driving range of 226 miles, and it will achieve 0 to 80% in 45 miles with 192 miles of range with max power of 100 kilowatts. Next is the Kia Niro EV. That's got a range of 230 miles, and that will charge 0 to 80% and provide 191 miles in 54 minutes at 100 kilowatts. 100 kilowatt max power. And then lastly, we have that Hyundai Ioniq 5, which has a really good driving range at 330 miles. And that will, it's a very fast charger. It will achieve 0 to 80% in 18 minutes and provide 242 miles of range at 350 kilowatts charging speed. And here's just a sample from the Chevy Bolt, what a typical charging session would be like. So those first 30 minutes of charging will go from about 5% to 43%. It's very quick and provide about 98 miles of range. The first 30 minutes are the fastest, will always be the fastest when charging. Next, the fast charging will slow down significantly from about 50 kilowatts to 20 kilowatts until the battery reaches 80%. So for about 30 minutes, it'll charge and gain about 90 miles of range from 43%, reaching about 74% of charge. And then that last bit of charge to reach that 100% is the slowest and will take roughly an additional hour to get those last 51 miles of range. And again, this is all to protect the battery and to lower battery degradation. Now, how is the DC fast charging network building out? So you can find DC fast charging stations exactly in the same way that you can find level two stations using those apps that Devin talked about. There's also route planners that are really helpful to help you pick exactly where you should stop excuse me, where you should stop to minimize your charging time. It does take a little extra planning when doing long road trips, but eventually you get used to it. We have several EV ambassadors that have written blogs on our site about their experience. Someone even traveled from Boston all the way to the Grand Canyon. And they said once they got used to stopping and they timed it with bathroom breaks and meals, it was very easy. And like we said on the last slide, DC fast charging is really meant to support drivers on long trips. Um, Here we have a map of the DC fast charging stations in southern New England. There are more DC fast charging. The more DC fast chargers there is, the easier it will be to support long distance drive. So installing these stations is really important, but it's also expensive. So the priority is putting them along highly traffic corridors where there is a lot of through traffic. For example, there are many plans to install a bunch along the Massachusetts Turnpike, along I-90 and I-95, and other major corridors along the Northeast. And this is also a really great opportunity to install these charging stations at places where people will want to spend some time and perhaps find some entertainment like restaurants, shopping centers, stores, and movie theaters. We also have some information on this slide about some proposed plans and funding that is underway. So the NEVI program, which is a federal program, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, will provide, it has already provided $63.5 million for the state of Massachusetts to install fast charging and 23 million for Rhode Island. In Massachusetts, 400 million through the state and through different utility programs is being used to fund new programs, and then 50 million has been allocated to EV infrastructure. Those details are still to be determined, but it will be used to build up DC fast charging in the state. And then within Rhode Island, phase one of the NEVI funding is currently underway. I know that they built new chargers down in Westerly, and in another location as well. And they are expected to be completed by this summer in June 2024. And for phase two, we're currently in the information gathering mode to install level 2 and DC fast charging around the state. And they are requesting public input. So if you're interested, when I send these slides out, you can click there and share your opinions. And Rhode Island is also expected to file with Rhode Island Energy for the utility company to provide further funding. That is to be determined currently. And on a final note, we want to talk about smart charging. So we know that electric cars are going to add to the total electricity load and to the demand on the grid. So we're really pushing for people to charge during off-peak hours. You can see here in that red section, peak hours are currently defined from 1 p.m. until 7 p.m. And this is when electricity demand is at the highest and the price for electricity is at the highest. So different utility programs have created time of use pricing, and that encourages EV drivers to charge during low peak and off demand times, which is defined outside of those peak hours, so overnight typically, and that will help manage the system to both decrease costs and to decrease demand on our electrical grid. So I'm going to ask Devin if there's any questions that we should go over.
So not any questions yet, but I would love to just give it a second to see if there's anything that else that pops up. But just some comments. So one is your electricity company website, if available, might also be a wealth of information. Everything from installing a charger to even potential savings on your bill, depending where you're located. I know mine was able to confirm I could install level 2 charger based on the equipment connected to my home. So yes, there's also incentives to do that as well, especially within the state of Massachusetts. There are a lot of good incentive programs, and so I actually might ask Ezra to include the recording of the most recent incentive webinar that we did, just in case people are curious in that follow-up email. And then the second comment, I'm not sure if it's a question or more a comment, but it's with EVs, is it more beneficial to discharge to 20% and charge up to 80% routinely rather than always charging to 100%? So I feel like you know the answer already, this person asking this question. But yeah, it's honestly better for the battery to stay between 20 and 80%. Obviously, we know that there are times when it's more beneficial for you personally to charge up to 100%. Like for example, if you know you're going to have a long day of driving, so you might use most, if not all, of your range, you then would charge up to 100% and then go about your business. But generally speaking, it is good to keep it between 20 and 80% because it's just better for your battery. Always charging your phone, for example, up to 100% will over time start to degrade the battery. So use it as needed. Okay. It doesn't look like we have any more questions coming in. So like I said earlier in the beginning of the presentation, Ezra was going to be sending a follow-up email around with lots of links and the recording and also the slide deck. So if you have any follow-up questions, please put reply to Ezra's email. We got one more question. So before installing a level 2 home charger, do I need to check with my electricity provider that the grid can supply the needed level in my area? I don't believe you should. It's not that much of a power suck. Um, level 1 and level 2 are the only ones you can have at home for a reason because they're like normal amounts of power that your house is supposed to be able to get. Whereas DC fast charging is just too powerful, so it's not it doesn't make sense to have it at home.
Okay. I think that's it for questions.
Cool. All right. So can you go to the next? So before we go, we are a nonprofit. And if you like what Ezra and I have done here today and really appreciate the information, uh, we appreciate you being here. If you can afford it and would like to, we would definitely encourage you and welcome any donations. So you can go to greenenergyconsumers.org/donate. But if not, we hope to see you at other webinars anyways. So keep an eye on our events page, greenenergyconsumers.org/events for upcoming webinars and other and maybe in-person events too, to be involved with us. And then as always, there's lots of different ways to be involved with us, like our Drive Green Community Facebook group. You can follow us on Instagram, our regular Facebook page. You can join our Drive Green newsletter, and you can pledge that your next car will be electric. Let me just double check. All right, so that is it for today. Thank you all for coming. We will be in touch soon, and thanks again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.